Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to a new video. So yeah, in this video I am just going to go through all of the Blu-rays and 4Ks that I've picked up for February 2024. Not a massive amount this month, but still some fairly sizable releases from February. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. So first up we have the Super Mario Bros. Trust the Fungus 4K limited edition box set. Yeah, I already did a unboxing for this, so if you want to check that video out, I'll leave a link in the description below. But yeah, I'm a massive fan of this movie, a huge guilty pleasure. So yeah, I was always going to get this box set. The 4K transfer is pretty decent. It's a shame there's no HDR on it, but you know, still, it's such a nice box set, and if you're a fan of the movie, it's definitely a must-have. But yeah, that is the Super Mario Bros. Trust the Fungus 4K box set. Next up, we have Dragged Across Concrete. This is a thriller starring Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn. They play these two police officers who are suspended due to excessive police brutality. And in a desperate attempt for money, they decide to pursue this gang of thieves who are about to conduct a bank robbery. I'd been meaning to see this film for a while. It's directed by S. Craig Zahler, who is best known for doing Bone Tomahawk and Brawl in Cell Block 99, two films I absolutely love, and I was kind of hoping this would be of a similar quality. I would say out of the three films that he's directed, this is probably the weakest one. I felt it was a bit too long and it's very, very slow paced, but it's still very dark and very violent like those previous two films. Still a good movie, don't get me wrong, but yeah, probably the weakest of the three out of the three films that the director has done. But yeah, that is Dragged Across Concrete. Next up, we have Duck You Sucker, otherwise known as A Fistful of Dynamite, directed by Sergio Leone. This is a spaghetti western starring Rod Steiger and James Coburn, who play these two outlaws who they cross paths at the beginning of the movie, and at first they're enemies, but then they eventually have to join forces during the Mexican Revolution. So like I said, this is directed by Sergio Leone, who's probably best known for doing the Dollars trilogy, Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America. And I'd always heard that this was sort of considered to be his weakest film or his most underrated. And after watching it, I would say it is probably his weakest of all of the ones that I've seen. It has all of the traits that you want from a Sergio Leone Western. It's got great cinematography, great music by Ennio Morricone, and it's got great lead performances from the two actors. They have great chemistry together. But for me, this film was lacking it was just lacking in terms of story, and it was lacking in a compelling villain. With The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, you've got Lee Van Cleef as the villain. With Once Upon a Time in the West, you've got Henry Fonda, but in this film you don't really have that compelling villain to really drive the film, which kind of lets it down for me, but it's still a fun spaghetti western nonetheless. So yeah, that is Duck You Sucker, otherwise known as A Fistful of Dynamite. Next up, we have a box set from Radiance Films, and we have the Cosa Nostra box set. So this is a collection of 3 Italian films starring Franco Nero. And they're all movies that basically deal with the mafia. So you have Mafia, you have The Case is Closed, Forget It, and you have How to Kill a Judge. Mafia is basically about this police officer in this small Sicilian village investigating a murder, and the mafia may be involved in it. The Case is Closed, Forget It. Franco Nero plays this guy who's sent to prison. And he discovers once he's there that there's members of the mafia in prison, and even there they seem to have a lot of control over the prison guards. And then How to Kill a Judge is basically about this movie director who releases a film where a judge is killed, and then not long after the film comes out, a judge in real life is killed in a very similar fashion. So it's kind of like life imitating art, or art imitating life. But yeah, really enjoyed these movies. Franco Nero is great. I think of the 3, The Case is Closed, Forget It is probably the one I enjoyed the most. I do like my prison dramas, my prison thrillers, and yeah, fantastic film. Very, very intense, disturbing in places. But yeah, great box set from Radiance Films. You get the 3 films, reversible artworks, the booklet, the hard box. So yeah, really nice release. So yeah, that is the Cosa Nostra box set. Another one from Radiance Films, and we have The Horrible Dr. Hitchcock. So this is an early 1960s Italian horror film about a doctor who's wife is accidentally killed at the beginning of the film after an overdose. The story then moves on a few years where he meets another woman who he marries. He ends up bringing her back to his old mansion, but what she doesn't realise is that this doctor is actually trying to reanimate his old wife using the blood of his new wife. Really fun Italian horror film. It has that sort of Hammer horror kind of vibe to it from the 60s. It's got a few different cuts on the film, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and again, another really nice release from Radiance Films. But yeah, I enjoyed it. That is The Horrible Dr. Hitchcock. Another one from Radiance Films, and we have A Moment of Romance. So this is a Hong Kong action drama from 1990. It stars Andy Lau, and he plays this guy he's like a criminal, and he's in this gang. And at the beginning of the film, after a robbery attempt, he ends up having to take this young girl hostage. Once they've gotten away, the rest of the gang just want him to kill her so she can't identify them as a witness. But he decides to let her go. And as the film goes on, the two characters kind of end up crossing paths again. And before they know it, they kind of start to fall in love despite their different backgrounds and circumstances. It feels a lot like a modern day Romeo and Juliet kind of film, but really good movie, especially if you like your Hong Kong action films. It kind of builds to a very bloody and brutal climax. But yeah, really enjoyed this one. That is A Moment of Romance. Another one from Radiance Films, and we have OC and Stigs. So this is an early 80s high school comedy satire movie directed by Robert Altman. It's basically about these two high school students called OC and Stigs. And the movie doesn't really have much of a plot. It's basically just these two characters who, for some reason, they have this hatred for this family, and the whole movie is just them antagonizing this family in different ways, and it's just comprised of segments of them doing certain things to make this family's life an absolute misery. It's a very strange film. Don't be expecting Porky's or Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's very, very different and very much a satire like Robert Altman intended with this film. Still a fun movie, but yeah, just very strange, and don't go into it expecting it to be anything like those regular 80s teen comedies. But yeah, that is OC and Stigs. Last pickup from Radiance Films, and another one directed by Robert Altman. And we have Thieves Like Us. So this is kind of like a prohibition gangster film starring Keith Carradine and Shelley Duvall. Keith Carradine plays a criminal who escapes from prison at the beginning of the film along with some of his gang members. They end up hiding out in this house with a few other characters, one of them played by Shelley Duvall. And as the movie goes on, the two characters kind of fall in love. And Shelley Duvall's character wants Keith Carradine's character to sort of get away from that gangster criminal life, but he finds that he just can't get away from it as easy as he'd like to. It feels very much like a Bonnie and Clyde type of film, very, very similar in terms of story. I thought the film was a little bit slow in places, especially in the middle, but it does build to a pretty good climax, I will say. But yeah, pretty enjoyable movie from Robert Altman. But yeah, that is Thieves Like Us. Next up, we have a new release from Eureka, and we have Samurai Wolf 1 and 2. This is a double pack of Japanese samurai films from the late 60s. They kind of feel very much like spaghetti westerns. They're both basically very similar films about, you know, the main character. He's kind of like a man with no name, wandering stranger kind of person who ends up, you know, rolling into town, and he finds himself embroiled into the local conflict. And it's basically the same kind of thing in both films. Really enjoyable films. Both of them are very short. They're about 70 minutes each, so you could easily watch the two of them in one night. And yeah, very bloody, very brutal, but really enjoyable films, especially if you like your Japanese cinema. So yeah, that is the Samurai Wolf collection. So for anyone who watched my previous pickups video, you'll know that I picked up the first 4 Star Trek films on 4K, and I have carried on with that this month. So I have now picked up Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and Star Trek VII, otherwise known as Star Trek Generations. So yeah, we have Star Trek V, which is probably one of my least favourite films of the franchise. It's the only one directed by William Shatner, and it's not a bad film per se, but yeah, it definitely is one of the weaker ones for me. Then we have The Undiscovered Country, which on a rewatch, it's probably my favourite. I do really like this one. It's a good send-off for the original crew, and it's just a fun movie. It's got some good supporting actors in there, and yeah, I just really enjoyed the story. So yeah, that is The Undiscovered Country. And then we have Star Trek Generations, which is kind of like meant to be the bridging the gap between the original crew and the next generation crew. I know a lot of people don't really like this one, and it is a flawed film, I will say that. But I actually think this is probably one of the most underrated films in the franchise. I really enjoy it on the whole. I think the story's pretty decent. You've got a good villain with Malcolm McDowell. It's shot really well. It looks beautiful, this film. Yeah, I like what they do with Kirk in the end. I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of that, but I really like it. I feel like the Next Generation crew, they all have a lot to do in this film, which I can't really say the same for some of the later films. But yeah, that is Star Trek Generations on 4K. Next up, we have a new release from Arrow Video, and we have Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and this is the limited edition exclusive artwork version, I believe. Yeah, I was always going to pick this up. I'm a huge fan of this movie. It's one of my favourite sci-fi horrors from the 1970s. Maybe on face value, the film itself is not scary, but I just think the whole idea behind this film is terrifying, and if it were to happen in real life, it would be pretty scary. But yeah, love this film. Great box set from Arrow Video. Transfer looks pretty good. And yeah, I can't really say much more than that. I just love this movie. So that is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Next up, we have Southern Comfort. This is the Vinegar Syndrome 4K box set version. This is a film directed by Walter Hill. It's my favourite Walter Hill film. It's basically about a group of soldiers who are on a training exercise deep in the swamps of, I want to say, Louisiana. They find themselves getting lost, and then they find themselves being hunted by the local Cajun population that live nearby. And it's just a thoroughly enjoyable, tense film. It feels very much like Deliverance crossed with Predator and a bit of First Blood. It's got a great cast in there. You've got Keith Carradine again. You've got Fred Ward, Powers Booth. Just a lot of great actors in this film. And yeah, really nice box set from Vinegar Syndrome. I like this sort of this magnetic part here that opens up like so. And then you've got like all your contents sort of in there. Lovely artwork on the box set, and the film looks great in 4K as well. So yeah, that is Southern Comfort. And then my last pickup for February. So as I've been rewatching the Star Trek films, it kind of got me in the mood to go back and revisit the original series. And I didn't own it on physical media at all, so I decided to pick it up on Blu-ray. So yeah, it comes in this really nice box set where the top lifts off like that, and you get your 3 seasons in there in digipacks. Yeah, I really enjoy this show. I was never the biggest fan of Star Trek growing up, but over the years I've really come to appreciate it, and I enjoy the whole franchise, but I just kind of fancied revisiting this original series because I just love those original characters. So yeah, that's basically it. So that is Star Trek, the original series on Blu-ray. So there you go, guys. Those are my pickups for February 2024. Really hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen any of these films. What do you think of them? Have you picked up any of these releases yourself? I would love to hear your thoughts. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you all again on the next one. So take care.